Hi, I'm Sarah.
And I'm Helen.
And this is the Squiggly Careers podcast. Every week we talk about a different topic to do with work and share some ideas and actions and tools that we hope will help all of us navigate our squiggly careers with that bit more confidence and control.
And I'm hoping, if you are a regular listener, that you are well aware that the Squiggly Sprint is coming. In fact, it is coming next week. Next week starts a 20-day learning series to help you accelerate your career development. These are super short episodes. It's 7 minutes each. And during the 20 days of the sprint in August, we'll be covering 20 different skills. So please sign up, get involved. We've already got thousands of people who've signed up to sprint with us in August. And I think it's just a really motivating way of learning. All the links for this are either in the show notes, so it just says sign up to the sprint, and that will basically start you off. You'll get the Ready Steady Sprint guide, and then everything else will come. Or if you can't find that, follow us at Amazing If on LinkedIn, because we're posting about the sprint there. You'll be able to see all the resources and get access to it there. And if you still get a bit lost, if you're like, I'm not on LinkedIn and I don't know where these show notes are, just email us. It's really easy. Helen and Sarah at squigglycareers.com, and we will send you whatever you need to get started on your sprint.
So today we're talking about how to be resourceful at work. And we think about resourcefulness as working with what you've got.
Motivating.
Which, yeah. I don't know. I think it is. I think it will be a motivating episode, I promise.
It sounds like just get on with it. It sounds like kind
yeah. Well, I guess that's the point, isn't it? It's almost like going beyond getting on with it, because you can't just get on with it, usually because something's got in your way. And I think it's often in those moments where you need to be resourceful, where something has become more limited than you'd imagined. So whether that is time, money, people, they tend to be the classic three areas. Or sometimes I was reading a bit of research about moments where being resourceful is particularly useful. It's often where an unexpected change has come your way. You know, it could be a bump in the road. It could be, we thought we were going to have £100 to spend on this and now we've got 50. But you can't change that 50. So it's not that you can sort of negotiate or make an argument to get back to where you were before. You have got to work with where you are, and you're trying to then stay optimistic and also probably rediscover a bit of control when things are feeling messy and probably not working out in your ideal way.
What I'm thinking in my head is, do you think we are equally resourceful, you and I, or do you think one of us is more resourceful than the other?
That's a good question. I would give us credit for both being resourceful. I think you have to be as well to run a company. Yeah. And actually, when we talk about the skills you need to be resourceful in second, there's a lot of chat about like entrepreneurial mindset being really helpful. Now, I don't think either of us ever describe ourselves as entrepreneurs, but we did start a company, and we have started lots of things and side projects. And so I do think that ability to sort of find a way, we're both good at. I just wonder if we do it in slightly different ways. Yeah. What about you? Was that basically
I think I'm amazing at it, and I was just trying to put you down.
Yeah, where you were like, you were just like, so if you could just tell me how brilliant I am at this, is that what you were hoping for there, or?
I think I came to the same conclusion. I think we do it in different ways, which is quite useful sometimes, because when I'm stuck, you can sometimes see ways through things that I can't. You'll be like, why didn't you do this, or speak to this person, or get that, and I'll be like, oh yeah, like I think your resourcefulness can unlock things. And I think sometimes my resourcefulness, I don't even talk about it. I'm like, I've already tried. You'll be like, should we do this? And I'm like, no, I've already set these things in motion. And
yes.
Like, I've already sort of found a way. I just haven't told you about it
I definitely recognise that. Yeah. Well, I wonder, when I was listing some of the skills that'd be helpful, I actually did divide them into almost like spotting or anticipating where you need to be resourceful, and then in the moment resourcefulness. And I think that's probably where some of our differences lies, because I think I'm often good at spotting we are going to need to be resourceful, so let's think about it now.
Yes,
because I look ahead, I'm naturally kind of future orientated, I'm a good critical thinker, so I see the shades of grey. I always ask myself, what if this doesn't work out, or what if something changed? I think we both have a level of optimism and pragmatism that helps us just in terms of our kind of behaviours and how we approach things. But then where I think you are really good is in the moment resourcefulness. So whether I've anticipated it or not, once I then say, okay, I feel like this might not work out in the way that we'd hoped, you're like, right, okay, so let's go. How else? Where else? Who else? You know, you I suppose you're such a pacey problem solver that is then incredibly useful, because I think that then translates into being resourceful. And I feel like neither of us like the idea of, oh, there's a bump or a brick wall, and going, oh yeah, okay. We're not very accepting. No. I don't think either of us are very accepting of that. We're like, okay, we don't ignore it or avoid it, because I think that doesn't help you. We're definitely not kind of blindly optimistic in the, oh well, hopefully it'll just all work out. I don't think we do that. I definitely don't do that. I think you are more optimistic than I am generally, kind of definitely more upbeat generally. But then we both will be like, I think we back ourselves to be like, there will be another way. We perhaps just haven't found it yet.
Well, what we're trying to do in this episode, everybody, is sort of take that find another way mindset and turn it into the skill set. So give you things that you can do if you have got a bit of a blocker or a barrier that is being put in front of you, to help you think, well, I'm going to find my way around this. So we've got some very practical things for you to take away and try out afterwards.
So idea for action 1 is firstly to write your worry list. Now, this does sound negative, and I do get that, but it is incredibly useful to get worries out of your head and to write them down. Get them onto a bit of paper. What is keeping you awake at night? What are you worried about? Because then I think you can turn that into, how do I work with that worry? How do I make that something that is more active rather than passive? You know, almost as soon as they get out of your head, as soon as you start to think about actions you could take or to do something about your worries, you know, I feel like the size of that worry automatically gets smaller. I think it always magnifies it in your mind, or certainly that is true. That is true for me. So to give you a very practical example, Helen and I actually did this yesterday. We both we saw each other in kind of real life in a room, and we both said, oh, we are worried about a book deadline we've got for a first draft. In September this year, we're going to be submitting our first 50,000 words on a new book.
Cool. Don't say it like that. It's really confronting.
No, that is what we are going to be hopefully doing. But we both said, oh, we were worried about not the writing, but the time. And you could just keep worrying about that, right? It could just keep circling in your mind. It could just spiral. But then we worked with the worry. We went, okay, so that is true. Like we kind of can't change that. We can't really, some of the constraints, some of the things that are limited is time. So we can't just say, oh, okay, well, we're not going to go. We've both got holidays. So, don't need to feel too sorry for ourselves. But we're like, you can't not go on the holidays. There are only so many days between now and September to do that. So you're like, okay, so that is the time is a limited resource. And so is the people, because it is mainly you and I. There is just the two of us. We can't sort of say, oh, does anyone else fancy writing a bit of this? Or, I mean, maybe we could
AI
could delegate it to it. I was like, oh, maybe this is where everybody's using AI.
Whereas ChatGPT version of us.
Yeah. I feel like we're really working really hard to make this brilliant. We're like, we could just literally delegate this to someone who could do it probably in half the time. But so we have got some very clear reasons why we need to be resourceful. And I think because we sort of took it off the worry list yesterday and we worked with the worry, we were like, right, okay, so, well, what's a worst case scenario? How could we think about our time differently? And we made some useful decisions around, right, let's focus on some of the main chapters. Let's worry less about some of the other things that can wait until post-September, that we know can wait, but that perhaps in an ideal world we would do now. We did work out some days that we can connect our holidays very unhelpfully, or one after the other. So we were both like, right, okay, but if you read this here and then we could chat here, then we'd make a bit more progress. So we sort of did some kind of that interdependency planning. And suddenly, it doesn't mean that the worry goes away. I think that's kind of important to say. If you said to me, are you still worried about that? I think we would both be nodding, yes. But I think how you feel about that worry does change. I felt more optimistic having talked about it than I did before. I felt like we'd got some practical actions and I just felt more confident. And I suspect then you were actually better able to take on the worry and to be more resourceful. And I was thinking about this, and I think a good tip for everybody is if you are managing a team, or even if you're just having a chat with a colleague, actually saying to somebody, what's on your worry list at the moment, is a really good question for a one-to-one conversation, because I think people often do keep their worries to themselves. And certainly if you're managing or leading a team, you might assume that something is on someone's worry list and actually they feel okay about it, but something different might be worrying them that you could support with, you could help them to work it through. But until someone says it out loud, you often don't know what they are. So I actually really like hearing what's on someone's worry list, because then I can be useful, I can be helpful.
It makes me think of sort of like the weight of the worry. You know, when it's in your mind and it's not shared and you don't feel like you're working on it, I feel it's actually quite a heavy weight. So like the weight of like the book date, for example, that's definitely been heavy in my mind and it's distracting from other things that I want to do. Whereas when you talk about, like you say, the worry is still there, but it's a bit lighter. I feel like I can work with it, I can move forward. So I think part of talking about it with other people is also part of that. And you know, when you are being resourceful, I think leveraging the people around you is a massive part of how you are resourceful. And sometimes that can be as simple as, I've got a worry I'd like to work through with you. Like that is a way you are being resourceful, because you know you're getting their brain on it and they're thinking on it, rather than you're just kind of carrying the weight of the worry in your mind. So idea for action number 2, in order to be more resourceful, is to preempt a no or blockers. So one thing that can kind of get in the way of being resourceful is when you get surprised by a no. So I ask Sarah for something, which I'm assuming she's just going to say yes to, and it's all going to be fine. And then the reality is I get a no. And suddenly I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting that, and I don't know what to do with it. And you know, your emotions might get kind of flagged by it a little bit, which can sometimes make you a bit less objective, and you suddenly feel a bit stuck because the thing that you wanted to do is no longer, it doesn't seem possible. But the point with preempting a no or a blocker is you go into that situation with another way in mind. So if I ask Sarah, I did ask Sarah for something earlier today. There's a trip that I would like to go on in November, and that has an impact on my time, which is our time than the business, because that will take me to a different place for a few days, and it has an impact on cost because I have to travel to the place. And so there are some considerations. But if Sarah had said, Sarah said yes, which is very kind, but she could have said no. She could have said, I don't think it's a priority at the moment. I think we need you here more than there, all those sorts of things. And I could have, preempted a no and thought, well, what if I offered to work when I'm there? Or what if I offered to kind of meet some of our clients to kind of get double the benefit of being in that place at that time? Or if it was absolutely a no, then maybe what I could do is create a mini summit here. Could I have a mini summit here with people rather than go over there? And having those things in mind mean in that situation, when you get the no, it doesn't have to be the end of the conversation, because sometimes no's are valid. There are lots of reasons why people might give you a no. There might be a really good reason why it isn't possible right now, but it doesn't have to mean there isn't another way or an alternative option. So I remember before, for example, I've had no's for funding for things that I've wanted to do, in large companies, or projects that I've wanted to get involved in, or things that I want to spend my time on. But having another way in mind, well, if that's not possible, then what about this? Or if I can't do that at the moment, then could we come back to it in a month's time when this particular thing has moved on? It just means the conversation can keep going, and it's back to that creative thing that Sarah mentioned more. You're being creative with the no because you've thought about it in advance.
So here we would encourage you to ask lots of else questions. So how else, who else, and where else will always just help you. That's a good sort of creative thinking technique. I think it gets you started. And when Helen and I were practicing this on a different project yesterday, all this resourcefulness that we need at the moment,
we do.
Those questions I think automatically get you to some different answers. And again, I was thinking through lots of the projects that I worked on in organisations prior to Amazing If. I always needed money for them because I always created things where I was always asking for cash. I was like, oh, can I have some budget for this project or this idea? I was never saving money. I was always spending money. I definitely did jobs where I spent companies' money on really good stuff, obviously, but it was definitely the sort of roles that I had. And so I think I got very used to the resourcefulness that's needed with people saying, well, no, there isn't a budget for this. There is something else somewhere else that is more important or more of a priority. And to your point, that wasn't wrong. And it wasn't because it was always a bad idea. It was just that is the reality. And so I often would ask myself, well, who else might have some budget who I could borrow? Is that a possibility? I would think, who could be an alternative to budget? So could people basically help us to make progress rather than cash, essentially? Where else cares about the work that I'm doing? So could all or part of my project be achieved by connecting it to another team's objective? So I was like, I didn't care. However I'll make it happen, I will find a way. And I would equally think, well, what could I make happen with no budget? Is it literally zero? With no cash, we can't move forward? Or actually, are there some things here that we could still do in a meaningful way, which then might actually create the case for cash further down the line? So, sort of that back to that point about a no now is not a no forever. And I think I often saw that. I think that helps you to also be resourceful, is not seeing kind of where you are now as where you will always be.
And Sarah and I were having an interesting chat. I say interesting, we find it interesting, about the relationship between resourcefulness and resilience. And I think particularly when you get a no, you can really see how these things overlap, because when you get a no, I think part of this is you've got to be resilient. You can't, it's not going, oh, they said no to me and that's the end of it. It's sort of seeing that no is just a trigger to find another way. And I think that's a big part of being resilient. Is I always go back to Adam Grant's definition of resilience is the strength and speed of your response to adversity. And I think, well, that's resourcefulness, right? I'm going to quickly come back with an option that can help me do this differently. And so they are, we were like, oh, are they the same thing or are they different? It's, it's a reflection for another day, but you can definitely see the relationship between them. So idea for action number 3 is to try a trade. And I find that I do this a lot, particularly now. I think running our own business, I do it because I feel, we're constrained with all the things that Sarah mentioned earlier, the time that we've got, the money we've got. And so sometimes to make things happen, I can't use the obvious things, which is, to pay somebody or spend a day somewhere. I have to get a little bit creative and think, well, what have I got to give in exchange for the thing that I want to get, basically, which is what we're talking about with trying a trade. And this might be your expertise. So maybe you've got particular knowledge of a business or a system or an industry that someone else hasn't got. Maybe you have got some time and you think, oh, actually, if you're starting that thing, then I can, give you a day a week for the next month to help you out. Maybe it's your profile. Maybe you could shine a spotlight on their work. I try to do that quite a lot. Sometimes I'm trading for things, particularly for people's work that I'm really interested in, I care about. You might have some particular skills. So, Sarah and I have got career development. I'll often trade that with people for things. There might be some services that we are looking for our business, so like design services, or people who might be working on, help us to think creatively about what we do with the podcast. And I can't pay everybody to come to a workshop because we haven't got the funds to do that. But what I could do is offer, in exchange of their time on a workshop, like a creative workshop for us, I could offer them, a bit of half an hour of career coaching, for example, because I have got that skill to trade in exchange for their time and expertise on something for us. And it starts with you really thinking, what is it that I need right now? That's different for all of us, depending on what you're trying to do. And when you think about, well, who's got what you need, knowledge, time, money, whatever it is that you need, then think about, what have I got to give that could help to make that happen? And it's quite, that kind of give, gain, trading thing. It is quite creative, but it definitely unlocks lots of opportunities.
Yeah, I think in these moments where we need to be resourceful, it is tempting to focus on what we've lost and what we don't have. And I think here what we're encouraging you to do is think, okay, I haven't now got the money that I thought I had or the resource that I thought I was going to have. What do I have? It's sort of really trying to get specific about all of the do's, like what you can offer: expertise, time, profile, influence, skills, contacts. Really break them down as well. When I was thinking about this, I was like, oh, what do you can go a bit big, when you're thinking about this, whereas I'm like, really be specific about, oh, well, maybe you have a great skill that actually not that many other people have. Or maybe you've got experience working in an industry that not many people in your organisation have, because maybe you've worked across a few different industries. It's almost kind of going back across your squiggly career and thinking about
what have you
all of your what's, all of your hows, all the experiences you've collected. That list of do's might not seem immediately obvious, but the more I thought about this, the more I was like, oh, well, actually, I think for all of us, this would be quite a long list of things that you do have. You might not immediately see how all of that long list connects to your challenge, but I would encourage you to start with a really, really long list, because I was like, oh, actually, I've still got some marketing skills. Because I always think now, oh, I don't have marketing skills anymore because I'm not in marketing. But then equally, I'm like, of course I do. We did a big company redesign and rebrand last year, and I led most of that work with our designer. I work with our designer a lot. I wrote our tone of voice. I'm like, actually, that's good
Still
stuff,
got
right?
these skills in the bank.
Still got, well, sort of. But you're like, if somebody said, if tone of voice was useful for somebody else, I have got that to give. That is something I could trade with someone else. It's a bit niche maybe for some people listening, but for some people they might be like, oh, actually that would be helpful. Or writing skills, how to write an article, how to come up with ideas. And so I think start with the long list, and then figure out from my long list of things that I do have, which of these can I trade, like for in this moment. But I think if you've got your long list to keep coming back to, I wonder whether, because we're all resourceful, I reckon, most weeks at work in some way, shape or form, you'll just start to practice this as a kind of natural way of responding when you do hit those kind of small kind of bumps along the way.
And Sarah gave me like a very valid challenge when we were talking about this idea. She was like, oh, I don't want people to think, well, I'm not a senior person, therefore, what have I got to trade? And I was talking about, I don't think Sarah does either. This isn't just about being senior, though it might seem simpler to see what you can trade when you're senior. And the example that I was giving of sort of a counter to that, a week or two ago, I did something with the Women's Association where there was a group of young women, sort of 15, 16-year-old girls who spent a few days working on how we take Squiggly into schools. And I think they could do a brilliant trade with me. They could say, oh, could we have like half an hour of mentoring, and basically in exchange we will go do some research on what the top 5 things are on people's minds at schools when they're thinking about work. And that could be really useful data for the things that you're trying to do, because those people have got insight into an area that I haven't, because they're in it and I'm not. And that's a really useful trade. They're not even in a corporate environment. They're not kind of what you'd think of as senior, but they've definitely got some influential insights that I have not got, and that's what they can trade. So think again back to the creative, just think really creatively about what have I got that person has not. And that is your trade. That's what you've got to give.
And our final idea for action is learn from the person or the people who always seem to find a way to make stuff happen. So I think if you look around your organisation, there'll be at least a couple of people who find a way to deliver impressive results, but they don't have endless resources. So there are some people in jobs where maybe, to Helen's point, they are senior, they've got massive budgets, they do brilliant work. But that can be a bit harder to learn from in this situation, because you think, oh yeah, but I don't have a multi-million-pound budget, or I don't have a team of 20. There's just me in my team, and do you know what, my budget's been cut. And so kind of connecting the dots between you and that person often feels trickier. So I think I want to learn from almost, and I'm putting myself in this category, I'm like, these are like scrappy people. They're quite good at like being determined, but not in a way where they're stubborn. It is, again, back to this, like they do seem to find a way through things changing or some of the uncertainty. So look for that person. They're almost a resourcefulness role model. Think of it kind of that way. And then watch what they do, Or even better, go and ask them for some advice. Because if they are a resourceful person, they will probably enjoy applying those skills to somebody else's problem. So it's quite nice, isn't it, to like solve someone else's problem rather than solving your own. So if you went to Helen, for example, and people in our team would do this, and they were like, oh, I've got a challenge today. This has changed, and now we've got a challenge. Like, I know Helen would get energy from doing that, like in the here and now. She would be better at doing that, certainly, than I would be in a kind of a spontaneous, you've not had to give her a heads up. She's just like, right, let's go. Let's find another way. Whereas if someone was starting a project and they talked to me about what can you anticipate could get in the way here, I would ask lots of questions that would help people to think through where and when they're going to need to be resourceful. Oh, have you thought about what you would do if, like I would be saying those sorts of things. And so, again, it doesn't have to be just one person, but who could you go away and have some conversations with, or just notice and just watch and observe what are the behaviours, what are the skills that then you could just sort of borrow a bit of brilliance from. So Helen, you've got a couple of examples of brilliant people here that we thought we'd give a shout out to.
I thought, and you can follow them on, I would follow them on, well, Instagram or LinkedIn, whatever works for you. But I see most of their well, I know, because I know them, I hear it and see it in conversation, but I think you can get a good sense of it if you want a bit of inspiration from what they share on Instagram. So my 3 people are, first of all, Lisa Goodchild. Just search for Lisa Goodchild on Instagram. And she's the creator of DigiLearning HQ, which is a social enterprise. And I know Lisa, and what I think she's very good is she creates energy and she makes the ask. That's when I see her. She's creates a lot of energy all around her work, and she's very, very good at just asking people to get involved in it. And she does an instant ask, actually, so she doesn't wait. If she's got your attention, she's going to make that ask. And I think there's just a thing here. The more asks you make, the more yeses you get. Like, she probably gets loads of no's, but she just keeps making asks. It's brilliant. And that, I think, is also quite similar to somebody else who I would recommend to follow, which is BJ Malenga. And you just search BJ Malenga on Instagram, you'll find him. He is an amazing entrepreneur. He started multiple businesses. Thing I think about that's really good about BJ, he's always got a lot of things. So he doesn't put all of his eggs in one basket. He's always got a lot of things on the go. So I think that's part of how I learn from him. And he always has questions. Like, he's just so curious. Like, what are you working on? Do you know this person? What's interesting for you at the moment? In fact, he has got so many questions that he's made a pack of questions that he carries around with him, which is just brilliant. Like a pack of playing cards that just got questions on them, because he's always asking questions, which I think he never gets stuck because he's always got another question. And then my third one, I've got loads of these people, I love them. Lemon Fuller. Follow Lemon on Instagram. Lemon runs a business called Lemonade Dolls. So she is another entrepreneur, but I think she's got such a squiggly career. Like, she's been a singer and a dancer, and now she runs this really amazing sustainable lingerie business. But she's just so resourceful in how she grows that business, how she engages the community. I think she is a very open learner. So she lets people know where she is and what she doesn't need and what problems she's facing, and she creates a big community around her. So there's always somebody to help her. And she, back to the trade, I think she gives energy. That is what she trades. She gives so much energy to other people, and then she gets back spades of support from them. And so there are more than those 3 people, but just in case you can't see them in your network yet, then these are 3 people that you can borrow from mine.
What's interesting is all those 3 examples they are very entrepreneurial, because I know all 3, probably not quite as well as you do, but certainly I've sort of seen what they share, and that sort of startup-y hustle mentality definitely comes through with all of them. When I think about a couple of people that I know from my kind of corporate days, and like super corporate days, like banking, if we're gonna go corporate, let's go big business. I once worked in an innovation team, worked for a brilliant lady called Claire, and in that innovation team, we actually didn't have loads of resources. So we weren't the biggest team, we didn't have loads of cash. And when I think about Claire, who I think is a very resourceful leader, and I think it is a really good leadership quality as well, I think what she did really well was influence. So she used her influence to find another way. So she would be thinking, well, we want to try and make this project happen, but I haven't got the millions of pounds that some of the other teams have got. So she would like build brilliant relationships. She would use her influence. She would find another way of making progress on our objectives and our outcomes, almost by attaching herself to people of influence. And then she was very influential as well. And I think almost it could have been a team where you didn't get anything done, because it's hard in big businesses to kind of cut through when you don't have those resources. But we always did, and I think she sort of over-invested in that area, and then it helped us almost like as a team to be resourceful. And we've not talked about that as much today, but I do think there are certain teams that you might also learn a lot from. Like, look at the team in your organisation that almost has the least. I think that's actually really interesting. Like, how do they manage to get stuff done? Because I have probably once or twice, I think, been in those kinds of teams. And it's probably no surprise, given what we do today, that I didn't mind being in those teams. I didn't need to be in the teams that always had like the biggest profile or the most amounts of money, because I probably quite liked the scrappy nature of like, oh, we're just going to find our own way. Plus, you can probably be a bit more rogue, right? Which probably suits me and you. And you can probably be a bit more creative because there's less of a spotlight on you, which also probably suits us. But that's maybe the other way to do it, is like look across your organisation and think, well, which is that team who they achieve stuff that you admire? Yeah, it could be a finance team, could be a procurement team. Like, what is it that they do kind of as a group? Because this, again, I think with all skills, you can think about developing a skill individually for your career, but you can also think about how do we develop this skill together as a team.
So maybe on this one, I think having some resourcefulness role models, either in your organisation or outside of them, is a useful thing to do. And I think it also just makes this skill very real, because you go from, oh, wouldn't this be a nice skill to have, to there are some people who are actually amazing at this. I just need to do a bit more of what they do. So quick summary of the ideas for action, which you will find in the pod sheet, which is the one-page summary that goes with all of our episodes to help you take action. So the first one is about turning your worry list into something that you can work with. The second action was about preempting the no's and the blockers so that you can find another way. The third one was trying a trade. And that fourth one we just talked about was learn from people who already do this well.
So that's everything for this week. We hope that has helped you to be that little bit more resourceful. If you've got other ideas or things that have worked well that you want to share with the community, please email us. We love hearing from you and we love your feedback. If it has been on your to-do list to leave us a rating or a review or subscribe, we really appreciate it. I know every podcast always says it, but it does make a massive difference to us. And we also read everyone, so it also gives us a little boost in the week to keep being resourceful along the way too. That's everything for now. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back with you again soon. Bye for now.
Bye everyone.